السلام عليكم طلابي الأعزاء، معكم المعلمة هلا سامر الأحمد من مدرسة الخنساء الثانوية في مديرية جنين. درسنا لليوم رح يكون قواعد من الوحدة التاسعة لطلاب الأول ثانوي and the title is relative clauses. So our learning objectives for today are: number 1, to identify the relative pronouns in English. Number 2, to join sentences using relative pronouns. And number 3, to differentiate between defining and non-defining relative clauses. Let's start. The first question, what are the relative pronouns in English language? We have 7 to 8 relative pronouns, but in this unit we'll only focus on 4 or 5 of them. Number 1, who or that, they stand for people. The example, this is the boy who or that won in the race. Notice that who refers to the boy. It describes him by giving a piece of information or describe the boy. Number 2, which or that, they stand for things. The example, this is the letter which or that you were asking about. Which refers to the letter, which is a thing or an object. Number 3, whose. Whose is used for position, whether we are talking about people or things. The example, this is the man whose phone was lost. So whose again describes or is used to express position. The last one, where. Where is used for places. The example, this is the house where I was born. So where refers to a place, which is the house. When do we use relative pronouns and why? First of all, you have to know that relative pronouns come after the nouns they describe. The other fact is that they are used to give information or to describe a person, an object, a place, etc. Let's see how. Look at the example here. I bought a yellow dress which is made of silk. We have 2 clauses here. The main clause is I bought a yellow dress, and this is the relative clause, the subordinate clause. The pronoun which refers to the dress, so it gives information about the dress. It describes it. It is made of silk. As I have mentioned in the objectives, you have to know how to use these pronouns and how to join sentences using them. But before this, you have to know these pieces of information. First of all, you have to know that who equals he, she, they, him, her, and them. Which equals or refers to it, they, them. For people, for things. Whose, because it is used for position, then it equals his, her, its, their, which are possessive pronouns. The last one, where, and it equals the pronoun their. To better understand this, let's see the examples here. Example number 1. Marie Curie is the woman. She discovered radium. We have 2 sentences here. And instead of having 2 separate sentences, you can join them using the relative pronoun. First of all, you have to go to the second sentence, she discovered radium, and you have to look for a pronoun that refers to a noun in the first sentence. So here we have she. Put the first sentence and the first clause in its place. Marie Curie is the woman, and then put who instead of the full stop. Who or that discovered radium. So we have one sentence consisting of 2 clauses. The other example, this is the house, Jack built it. In the second sentence, we have the pronoun it, and it refers to the house. This is the house, which, because we use which when we have the pronoun it, which Jack built, full stop. And notice that the pronouns can be subject or object. Example number 3. This is the woman I found her ring. In the second sentence, we have a possessive pronoun, a possessive adjective, and it refers to the woman. So we have to use whose. This is the woman whose ring I found. And make sure that whose is followed by the noun it refers to, or it describes or modifies. Number 4, do you remember the place? We caught the train there. We have 2 separate sentences and you have to join them using what? Where? Because we have the pronoun there, and there refers to the place, the place. So it becomes like this. Do you remember the place where we caught the train? Question mark, because we have a question here. Another important point to talk about when regarding the relative clauses is this. We can leave out, drop, omit the relative pronoun if it is the object of the relative clause. How? Let's see. Example number 1. This is the house, Jack built it. When we join them in the previous slide, it becomes this is the house that or which Jack built. In this sentence, you have the choice to get rid of that because it refers to the object. So it becomes this is the house Jack built, and this is acceptable and correct. Another example. This is the woman. I interviewed her. Again, notice we have an object pronoun. So you have to think that, yes, we can drop the relative pronoun. Let's see how. This is the woman. We just join that I interviewed yesterday. Can we get rid of that? Yes, because it refers to an object pronoun. That I interviewed yesterday becomes this is the woman I interviewed yesterday. And make sure that the subject is here, so you are free to drop the relative pronoun in these situations. Let's practice more and open your book on page 90. This is page 93. Yes. The question says, join the 2 short sentences together. So this is the first question. The first part of the question. To make one longer sentence, use that, but leave it out if it isn't needed. So we have 3 things to do: joining, using that, and leaving it out when it is not needed. Let's start. This is the book. I was reading it. Look at the second sentence. We have an object pronoun, then yes, we can drop the relative pronoun. This is the book I was reading yesterday. There is no need to use that in this sentence. Number 2, that's the same film. I saw it at the cinema last week. Again, we have an object. Here's the subject, the verb, the object. So yes, we can drop that. That's the same film I saw at the cinema last week. Number 3, this is a folk tale. I remember it from my childhood. We have again an object pronoun, so yes, we can drop that. This is a folk tale I remember from my childhood. Full stop. Number 4, she's the new student. She arrived last week. This is different because we have a subject pronoun, she. So we can't drop the relative pronoun because we can't drop the subject. She's the new student that arrived last week. So ever never drop that in this sentence or in the same sentences because it is the subject. This is the verb and this is the subject. The last example or the last sentence, Zarif brings back gifts. They are from different parts of the country. Again, we have a subject, so we can't drop the relative pronoun. It becomes like this. Zarif brings back gifts which are subject verb, so you can't drop this, which are from different parts of the countries, or that are from different parts of the countries. Now let's move to another topic related to relative clauses, of course, the types of relative clauses. In English language, we have two types of relative clauses. The first type, defining relative clauses. The other is non-defining relative clauses. Let's see the examples in order to conclude or to reach a conclusion. Example number 1. They are the people, this is the main clause, who or that want to buy the house. In this relative clause, notice that the clause gives an important piece of information about people. When we say they are the people, there is still something missing. So we need this part, we need this clause, so it's defining, it is important. Another example of a defining relative clause. This is the book which or that I borrowed from the library. So this relative clause is very important and we can't miss it because it gives an essential piece of information about the book. So we can say that defining relative clause gives essential information about the noun. Another important thing to know is in defining relative clauses, you can use that. And you don't use commas. So there is no commas here. The non-defining relative clauses. Look at the first example. My grandmother, who is 70 years old, is visiting us on holiday this year. The relative clause here is giving an extra piece of information. It's not essential. It's extra, it's additional. So she's 70 years old. If we just skip this piece of information, we have a full sentence. My grandmother is visiting us on holiday this year. So this is extra, so this is non-defining relative clause. Another example. Canberra, which is the capital of Australia. This is an extra piece of information, background information, is located at the northern end of the Australia Capital Territory. So we can say that non-defining relative clause gives extra or additional information about the noun. You can't use that in this type, and you have to use commas. Notice we have two commas here because they are non-defining relative clauses. Let's practice more and open your book on page 92. The question says, question number 2. Join the two short sentences to make one longer sentence. Replacing the underlined parts with relative pronouns, use that where possible. So when do we use that? When we have a defining relative clause. So you have to decide. Let's see sentence number 1. The story happens in Jaffa. Jaffa is a city in Palestine. As I have just said, you have to go to the second sentence, look for a pronoun. We don't have a pronoun here, but we have the same noun. So Jaffa, Jaffa. Its pronoun is it. It is a city in Palestine. So put the first sentence in its place. The story happens in Jaffa, which is a city in Palestine. First of all, as you notice, this is an extra piece of information. It gives an additional piece of information, so it is non-defining. Because it's non-defining, then you can't use that, and you have to put a comma before the relative pronoun. The story happens in Jaffa, which is a city in Palestine, full stop. Number 2. Have you seen the letter? It came yesterday. We have the pronoun it, then you have to use which or that. Let's see. Have you seen the letter that came yesterday? You can use that here because the clause is defining. It gives a very important piece of information. We are talking about the letter that came yesterday, not the day before yesterday. So it's very important piece of information. Then you can use that instead of which, and you don't have to use any type of punctuation marks. Number 3. The main character is very poor. He has 3 sons. Go to the second sentence. we have the pronoun he, and it refers to the main character. So it becomes like this. The main character who has 3 sons. And why do we move this clause? Because, as I said before, the relative pronoun should come immediately after the noun it describes. The noun is character, then you have to move the whole clause after the noun. Who has 3 sons? We use 2 commas here. Is very poor, and continue the first sentence. In this sentence, you can notice that we have a non-defining relative clause. It gives extra piece of information. He has 3 sons, it's something extra. Then you can't use that, and you have to put 2 commas between the clause. One last activity, activity 4 on page 94. The question says, join the 2 sentences to make one longer sentence. So, join. Replacing the underlined parts with relative pronouns, you have to decide which is the correct relative pronoun. And remember to use the correct punctuation, the commas, the full stops. And this depends on whether the clause is defining or non-defining. Let's see number 1. That's the house. I was born there. Look at the second sentence. We have the pronoun there, which refers to the house. And as I said before, there is used instead, we use were instead of there. So it becomes like this. That's the house, the first clause, the main clause. You put were after the noun it describes, and continue the second clause. I was born. And you get rid, of course, of the pronoun in the first sentence. That's the house where I was born, full stop. Number 2. She's the woman. I borrowed her books. Notice that we have here a possessive pronoun, her books. Then you have to use whose. Let's see how. That's the woman, the main clause. We put whose after the noun it describes, and don't miss the noun that whose modifies, whose books. Whose books I borrowed, full stop. In these sentences, we have defining relative clauses, so you don't have to use any kind of punctuation marks. Number 3. I am going to Ramallah. It isn't very far from here. We have the pronoun it, then you can use which or that. Is it a defining or non-defining relative clause? It isn't very far from here is extra piece of information, so you can't use that. You have to use which. I am going to Ramallah, comma, it's non-defining, which isn't very far from here, full stop. Number 4. The main character is a young man. The man's wife is always angry with him. Here we have the possessive s, then you should use what? Whose. Put the first clause, the main character is a young man whose wife is always angry with him, full stop. The last example, the last sentence, my brother is good at basketball. He is very tall for his age. In the second sentence, we have the pronoun he. It refers to my brother. So notice that the pronoun isn't immediately, they are not very close together with the noun. So he, my brother. Then you have to move the whole clause because you are describing my brother. My brother, who, because we are talking about a person who is very tall for his age, and this is extra, so it's non-defining. You have to use commas, and then continue the first clause, the main clause, is good at basketball. My brother, who is very tall for his age, is good at basketball, full stop. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for your listening.